I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to get blindsided like this, but here I am. My name's Mark, and I've been married to Lisa for about 5 years now. We had a pretty decent life, not perfect, but stable. She's one of those women who can be bitchy, sarcastic, and manipulative when she wants to be, but I always thought that was just her personality. Still, I trusted her. At least, I did until the recent company retreat. It was supposed to be a chance for the team to unwind, bond, and maybe even get some work done in a relaxed setting. We went to this fancy resort about 2 hours out of the city. I was excited because the company was trying to push a new product, and I was one of the lead presenters. I prepared my slides, my notes, everything. Lisa, of course, said she was just there to support me, but I had my suspicions. She's always been jealous of my successes, and I could tell she was more interested in what she could get out of the trip than in supporting me. The first signs of trouble started early. Lisa was acting a little too interested in chatting with my business partner, Jake. They had this weird rapport, laughing a little too much, exchanging texts when they thought no one was looking. I brushed it off as her usual bitchy attitude. Maybe she was just bored or trying to stir some drama. But then I noticed her sneaking her phone out during meetings, hiding the screen from me when I glanced over. She'd always been the kind of woman who would lie about small stuff, so I didn't think much about it at first. However, the real shock came during my presentation. I was up in front of investors, standing there, trying to look confident when I saw her walk out of the conference room. No warning, no nothing. I figured she needed to take a call or grab some air. But then I noticed her sneaking back in from a side door, and she looked flushed, like she'd just done something she wasn't supposed to. Plus, she was wearing this tight blazer that looked a little out of place for a casual resort. I felt my stomach drop just watching her. That's when I caught a glimpse of her phone in her hand. I could see the glow of an ongoing chat. My heart started pounding. I knew she was hiding something, and I was suddenly filled with this sickening sense of dread. I excused myself from the presentation, telling the investors I needed a quick bathroom break, and I headed straight for her. When I confronted her near the hotel lobby, she was quick to lie. I was just talking to a client about some contract details. She snapped, eyes darting around, trying to hide her phone. But I knew better. I saw the messages pop up on her screen, timestamped during the time she supposedly prepared contract details. It was all there. The texts, the secret meetings she'd been having with Jake, regular, almost intimate ones. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. She kept lying, saying it was nothing, just work stuff, that I was overreacting, that I was paranoid. But I knew the truth. It was a betrayal on every level. And that's when I realized I was just a fool for trusting her. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of her sneaking around, the way she lied too. My face, it all kept replaying in my head like some twisted film. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs. Maybe I was blind. Maybe I was just too stupid to see what was happening right under my nose. It's always easier to blame yourself after something like this. I kept thinking about how she always had a snide remark when I tried to talk about my work, how she'd roll her eyes when I was stressed out about deadlines. It was like she was waiting for me to fail, waiting for something to give her an excuse to look elsewhere. The next morning, I decided I couldn't pretend everything was normal anymore. I waited until she was in the shower and then went through her phone. I wasn't planning to snoop. I just needed to see if I was imagining things, but once I started scrolling, I couldn't stop. The messages were explicit, flirty, and downright disgusting. They weren't just about work. They were about how much she wanted more time alone with Jake. How she was sick of pretending in front of everyone. How she loved the thrill of sneaking around. I found photos too. Not just of Jake and her, but of her in bed with him, her lips on his neck, her hand wrapped around his waist. That's when I lost it. I felt like my world was crashing down around me. All those years, all that trust, and she was out there cheating with my business partner. I couldn't even think straight. I was furious, not just at her, but at myself for not seeing it sooner. I wanted to punch something, scream, break stuff. Instead, I just sat on the bed, trembling, staring at the screen. The betrayal was so raw it physically hurt. My stomach churned with a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me like that, right there in that conference room while I was pouring my heart into that presentation? I had to confront her, no matter how much it hurt. I knew I couldn't let this go, but I also knew I had to plan my next step carefully. If I went off half-cocked, I'd give her a chance to spin some bullshit to gaslight me again. I needed to. Smart, cold, even. I waited until she got out of the shower, then called her into the bedroom. When she saw my face, her usual bitchy smirk faded. She knew I had found out. "Lisa," I said, voice hoarse but steady, "we need to talk." She tossed her hair, trying to act like nothing was wrong. "What about Mark? I don't have time for your accusations." But her eyes gave her away. There was a flicker of guilt, a flicker of fear. I looked at her and saw the truth in her eyes. She knew I knew everything. That moment I realized I was done playing nice. I had to decide what to do next. I couldn't keep pretending she was innocent. The trust was broken, shattered beyond repair. I asked her outright if she'd been cheating on me. She blinked at me, then laughed, this fake, bitchy laugh that made my stomach turn. "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes, "you're overreacting as usual. I was just talking to Jake, it's nothing." Nothing? I'd seen the pictures, the messages. The way she looked at him like he was some kind of prize. Did she really think I was so naive? That I'd buy her stupid excuses? I told her I knew the truth, and that I wasn't going to stand for her bullshit anymore. Her face twisted into a sneer. "You're just jealous, Mark. Maybe you're mad because I don't care about your little business and your stupid presentation. Maybe I'm bored of being married to a guy who's too busy to notice what's going on." That's when she threw the last punch, trying to make me feel like I was crazy, like I was the one at fault. But I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't going to be a fool anymore. I was done with her lies, her manipulations, her cheating. That night I sat alone in our bedroom, feeling like I'd been hit by a train. The betrayal was so deep I wasn't sure how I was supposed to fix this, or even if I wanted to. All I knew was that I had to figure out my next move, and I wasn't going to let her off the hook that easy. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't look at Lisa the same way. The woman who used to be my wife, the one I trusted, was now this stranger I barely recognized. I spent the next couple of days trying to process what I'd found, trying to decide how to handle it. Part of me wanted to explode, to throw her out, to end this nightmare immediately. But another part, the more calculated side, knew I needed a plan. I couldn't just react emotionally. I had to get her to slip up again, to make sure I had concrete proof before I did anything drastic. I started by installing a few discrete apps on her phone just to monitor her messages and calls. I wasn't proud of spying, but I knew Lisa. She was manipulative, sneaky, and a liar. If I was going to catch her, I had to be methodical. I also made sure to keep my own phone and emails under tight control, just in case she tried to do some damage control or spin a story. Honestly, I felt like a complete fool. How did I let her get away with this for so long? I kept replaying the moments, the signs I ignored, the little things she said that now seemed so obvious. Meanwhile, she kept up her act, pretending everything was fine. She'd walk around the house like nothing had changed, sometimes giving me that icy glare when I looked at her too long. The bitchy attitude was worse than ever. She'd lash out when I asked her questions about her whereabouts, accusing me of being paranoid or controlling. "You're just insecure," she'd sneer. "Seriously, Mark, get a grip." But I knew better. I had the proof, and I was just waiting for the right moment to make her admit it. One day, I caught her in a lie. She told me she was at some business meeting with her sister. I checked her location logs and saw that during that time, she was with Jake. Not only that, but her phone records showed calls and messages with him well into the night. That was it. I knew I had enough to confront her again, but this time I was ready. I decided I'd catch her red-handed if she tried to deny it again. That evening she came home late, smelling of perfume I didn't recognize, her face trying to act nonchalant. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV, but I kept my eye on her. She went into the bedroom trying to sneak in without me noticing. I followed her, blocking the door. That's when I saw her trying to delete some messages on her phone. I grabbed her arm gently but firmly, holding her steady. "Who were you texting all night?" I asked, voice low but steady. Her eyes widened for a second, then she rolled her eyes and scoffed. "It's none of your business." That was the moment I knew I had her. I didn't need her to admit everything outright. The proof was in her own bullshit. I pulled out the screenshots from her phone, the photos, the messages. Her face turned pale and she started to panic. She stammered, trying to come up with explanations. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice shaking. "We're just friends. Jake and I have been talking about some work stuff, that's all." I looked at her, disgusted. That explanation didn't even make sense. She was caught red-handed, lying to my face again. I could feel the rage bubbling up, but I kept my composure. I knew I had her now, and I was going to use this to end things once and for all. I told her she was done, that I was done, and that I wasn't going to keep living like this with a wife who cheated, lied, and manipulative enough to gaslight me. I told her she had a choice: come clean or I'd do it for her. She finally broke down, crying, trying to deny everything, but I didn't care anymore. I'd seen enough. The betrayal had cut too deep. I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach every time I looked at her. This woman I loved, who I thought loved me, was screwing around behind my back with my business partner. That night I didn't sleep either. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the betrayal crush me. How do you pick up the pieces after something like this? I had no idea. All I knew was that my trust was broken, and I'd have to decide whether I could forgive her or if this was the end. But one thing was certain: I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of it anymore. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. I couldn't eat properly, couldn't sleep, and everything around me seemed distant, like I was just observing my own life from the outside. Every time I looked at Lisa, I felt this mix of anger, disappointment, and a deep, aching sadness. I kept replaying her lies, the way she tried to deny everything, the way she gaslighted me like I was some paranoid fool. But I had proof now, and I knew I couldn't trust her again, not even a little bit. I spent hours thinking about what I was going to do. Part of me wanted to just throw her out and get rid of her right then. That's what most of my gut told me. But another part, the cold, calculating part, knew I needed to be strategic. I decided I'd let her keep lying for now, see how far she was willing to go before making any big moves. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I still had some pride. I wasn't going to make any rash decisions, so I started gathering more evidence. I set up hidden cameras in the house, nothing obvious, just small motion-activated things I could turn on when I wasn't around. I also kept tabs on her every move, checking her social media, her texts, her emails. I wasn't trying to ruin her completely, at least not yet, but I needed to be sure of what I was dealing with. I wanted her to trip herself up to see how deep her lies went. Meanwhile, she kept up her act. She'd come home late, smelling like perfume, acting innocent. Sometimes she'd get defensive if I asked about her whereabouts, accusing me of being crazy or possessive. I could see the smirk on her face when she thought she was fooling me. It made me want to scream. How could she be so contemptuous, so dismissive of everything we had? I knew I had to hold myself together, even as the rage simmered just beneath the surface. One night I caught her in a blatant lie. She told me she was working late at her office. I checked her location and it said she was still at home, but her phone records showed she'd been texting Jake nonstop. I knew she was lying again. The proof was right there. That's when I decided I'd had enough of her bullshit. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I sat her down again, this time with the evidence in my hand. I showed her everything: the messages, the timestamps, the photos. Her face went pale, her eyes darted around like a cornered animal. She tried to spin some story about how it was all innocent, how they were just working on some project, but I didn't buy it. I told her I knew the truth, that she was screwing around with my business partner, that she'd been lying to me right to my face. That was the moment she broke. She started crying, begging, trying to justify her actions with some bullshit excuse about how she was bored and not getting enough attention. She told me she felt neglected, that I was always working, always busy with my career, and she just needed some excitement. That's when I saw the real her, the manipulative, bitchy woman who always put herself first. I felt empty. All the love I had for her was evaporating fast. I realized that I'd been a fool to think I could fix this, to think she'd ever change. She did care about me. She cared about her own selfish needs and whatever thrill she got from sneaking around. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. I kept telling myself that I deserved better than this, better than someone who would lie and cheat and look me in the eye like I was nothing. I knew I had to decide soon. Either I'd give her another chance and learn to live with her betrayal, or I'd cut her loose and start over. Honestly, I was leaning toward the latter. I couldn't imagine staying married to someone who had so little respect for me. But I also knew I needed to be careful. Whatever I did, I had to cover my tracks, protect myself legally, and make sure I had enough evidence to back up my next move. I wasn't about to get played again, not after everything I'd seen. So I started making plans. I contacted a lawyer just to get some advice, and I also began mentally preparing myself for whatever was coming. I'd been betrayed badly, but I wasn't going to let her ruin me completely. I'd fight for whatever was left of my dignity. And if that meant ending things, then so be it. I wasn't going to be the fool in this story anymore. The decision didn't come easy, but deep down, I knew what I had to do. Every new piece of evidence I uncovered just confirmed what I'd suspected from the start. Lisa wasn't coming back from this, at least not as my wife. I was done. The betrayal ran too deep, and I couldn't stomach the thought of sharing a life with someone who lied and cheated so coldly. Still, I had to think about the practical side, dividing what we had, protecting myself legally, and trying to keep some semblance of control over a situation that was rapidly spiraling out of my grasp. I made an appointment with a lawyer the very next day. I didn't tell Lisa, didn't want her to get wind of what I was planning. I just wanted to know what my options were, how to protect myself, and what steps I should take if I decided to go through with a divorce. The lawyer was straightforward. She advised me to gather every piece of evidence I had, document everything, and prepare for a long, messy process. She also told me to keep my emotions in check, something I was struggling with every hour. Meanwhile, I started packing some essentials, knowing I wouldn't be able to stay under the same roof much longer. Every time she looked at me with that bitchy smirk, I felt a surge of anger. I was so sick of her dismissiveness, her lies, her manipulations. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. Honestly, I felt like a fool. I had loved her, trusted her, and she'd thrown it all away for some asshole like Jake. One night I caught her red-handed again. She was sneaking out of the house, texting someone on her phone. I followed her to this dingy hotel on the outskirts of town. That's where I saw her going into the room with Jake. My stomach dropped, but I kept my cool. I snapped some photos, took screenshots of the entire thing, and went straight back home. That was the final nail in the coffin. I had the proof I needed. The next morning, I laid it all out. I confronted her with everything: the photos, the messages, the location logs. She tried to deny it, of course, but her voice cracked, her eyes darted around, and I could tell she was panicking. That's when I told her I was done. I told her she could pack her things and leave, that I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. She started crying, begging, screaming that it wasn't what it looked like, that she loved me, that she was sorry. But I wasn't buying it anymore. The damage was done, and I knew I had to cut my losses. She left that day, screaming and crying, claiming she'd changed, that she loved me, that it was just a mistake. But it was too late for apologies. I felt numb, really, like I'd been punched so hard I couldn't feel anything. I was angry at her, angry at myself, angry at the whole situation. How could I trust someone like her? How did I let it get this far? The betrayal cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever be able to move past it at all. Now I'm in this weird in-between phase, trying to rebuild what's left of my life. I've filed for divorce, started looking into therapy to deal with the emotional fallout, and trying to focus on myself. I still feel the sting of betrayal every day, but I also feel a strange sense of relief. It's like I finally woke up from a nightmare I didn't even realize I was in. Looking back, I realize I should have seen the signs sooner. Maybe I was blinded by love or just too comfortable to notice the cracks, but I also know that I won't let her manipulate me again. I've learned that trust can be broken just like that, and once it is, it's almost impossible to repair. If you're reading this and going through something similar, my advice is, pay attention to the signs, don't ignore your gut, And don't be afraid to walk away if someone shows you they don't respect or value you. Because at the end of the day, you've got to protect yourself emotionally, legally, and physically. You deserve better than betrayal and lies. Now that everything's settled, I find myself looking back on this mess and trying to make sense of it all. Honestly, I feel a mixture of relief and anger. Relief because I finally got out of that toxic situation, and anger because I wasted so much time trusting someone who clearly didn't deserve it. I keep asking myself how I missed the signs, how I let things spiral out of control for so long. But I know I can't dwell on that. The past is the past. What matters now is moving forward, rebuilding what's left of my life. I've started focusing on myself, going to therapy, reconnecting with friends I neglected, and working on my business. The betrayal hit me hard, but it also woke me up. I realize now that my happiness isn't tied to someone else's approval or affection. It's about me, about learning to trust myself again. I'm not naive anymore. I know how dangerous manipulation can be, and I refuse to let anyone gaslight me again. I've also learned a lot about boundaries. Lisa's betrayal made me realize I was too accepting for too long, too willing to overlook red flags just to keep the peace. Moving forward, I want someone who respects me, who values honesty, and who understands that I won't tolerate lies or cheating. That's something I'll never accept again. Most importantly, I've come to understand that sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to walk away. No matter how much you love someone, if they don't respect you enough to be honest, then they're not worth your time. And honestly, someone who cheats and manipulates the way she did, they don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve to be left to face the consequences of their choices. In the end, this whole experience has taught me a harsh but valuable lesson. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's nearly impossible to restore. It's better to see the truth early on than to get dragged through the mud trying to fix something that's already beyond repair. I wish I'd recognized her true nature sooner, but I guess I was too blind to see it. Now, I'm choosing to focus on healing, on growing stronger. I'm grateful for the lessons, even if they came at a painful cost. I won't let this define me. Instead, I'll let it teach me to be more cautious, more aware, and more respectful of my own worth. Because at the end of the day, I know I deserve someone who values me, who treats me honestly, and who understands that betrayal is never the answer. And that's what I'll carry with me. From this, a hard-earned lesson that I won't forget. No matter how much it hurts, I'll come out the other side better, stronger, and more prepared for whatever life throws next.